The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and broken promises. I sat between my mother and Uncle Richard, watching our family attorney shuffle papers with the solemnity of a funeral director. 3 weeks had passed since Aunt Catherine's death, and we'd finally gathered for the reading of her will. "This is highly unusual," Mr. Patterson said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "In my 40 years of practice, I've never quite seen anything like this." My mother's grip tightened on her handbag. Uncle Richard leaned forward, his jaw clenched. Cousin Jennifer stared at her phone, probably calculating her expected inheritance down to the decimal point. We all knew Aunt Catherine was worth approximately $2.3 billion. Forbes had confirmed it just last year. "Just read it, Patterson," Uncle Richard said. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Very well. I, Catherine Marie Ashford, being of sound mind and body—" "Debatable," Jennifer muttered. Mr. Patterson continued, undeterred. "Hereby bequeath my entire estate, including all properties, investments, trusts, and liquid assets, to Marcus Anthony Wright." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. "Who the hell is Marcus Wright?" Uncle Richard finally exploded, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. "That's the homeless man," my mother whispered, her voice hollow. "The one she befriended." "This is insane!" Jennifer shot to her feet. "She was clearly not of sound mind. We'll contest this. "There's more," Mr. Patterson interrupted, his voice firm. Mrs. Ashford anticipated challenges to her will. She had 3 separate psychiatric evaluations conducted in the months before her death, all confirming her complete mental competency. Additionally, she left individual letters for each family member. He began distributing envelopes. Mine felt heavy in my hands, my name written in Aunt Catherine's distinctive flowing script. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I sat there remembering. Aunt Catherine had always been different. While the rest of the Ashford family collected art, summer homes, and social status, she collected stories. She'd made her fortune in tech, selling her software company for an unfathomable sum at age 45. Everyone expected her to settle into philanthropic luxury like a proper billionaire. Instead, she'd become increasingly eccentric. It started small. She'd stop to talk with street vendors. She'd sit in diners for hours, chatting with waitresses. She donated, yes, but not in the way that earned her naming rights or gala invitations. She gave directly, quietly, often anonymously. "She's embarrassing the family," Uncle Richard had complained at countless dinners. "Walking around downtown like some kind of tourist, talking to anyone with a sob story." "She's lonely," my mother would reply, though even she sounded uncertain. "Ever since Thomas died." Uncle Thomas had been Aunt Catherine's husband, dead from a heart attack at 52. They'd been inseparable, and his death had gutted her. We all thought she'd remarry eventually. She was still beautiful, brilliant, and obviously wealthy. Instead, she seemed to drift further from us with each passing year. The final straw for the family had come 2 years ago at my cousin's wedding. Aunt Catherine had brought a guest, a homeless man named Marcus she'd met at a soup kitchen where she volunteered. He'd worn a suit she'd bought him, his beard neatly trimmed, looking uncomfortable but dignified. "This is unconscionable," Uncle Richard had hissed to my mother. "She's making a mockery of this family." But I'd watched Aunt Catherine that night, really watched her. She'd been laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time since Uncle Thomas died. Marcus had sat quietly beside her, occasionally contributing to conversations with surprising insight. When dessert was served, I'd seen her lean over and whisper something to him. He'd smiled, a real, warm smile, and she'd patted his hand. It was the same way she used to touch Uncle Thomas's hand. After that night, the family had largely frozen her out. Invitations became scarce. Phone calls went unreturned, on both sides. I'd been away at graduate school, caught up in my own life, and by the time I returned home, the rift had become a chasm. Back in the lawyer's office, Uncle Richard was threatening litigation. Jennifer was crying angry tears. My mother sat statue still, the unopened envelope in her lap. I slipped out quietly, taking my letter with me. Outside, I sat on a bench and finally opened it. Her handwriting was as elegant as ever, despite the cancer that had been eating her alive in those final months. My dearest nephew, I imagine you're confused, possibly angry. The family certainly is. I can picture Richard's face turning that particular shade of purple he reserves for maximum outrage. I hope you'll read this with an open heart. I didn't choose Marcus over the family. I chose humanity over wealth. I chose genuine connection over obligation. Let me tell you about him, and perhaps you'll understand. I met Marcus 3 years ago at St. Augustine's Soup Kitchen. I'd started volunteering there after months of feeling utterly purposeless despite, or perhaps because of, my enormous wealth. He was the man who never cut in line, who always said please and thank you, who would give his extra bread roll to someone who looked hungrier. We started talking, just talking. He told me about his life. He'd been a high school teacher, happily married, middle class. Then his wife died from breast cancer. The medical bills bankrupted him. Depression followed. He lost his job, his home, his family stopped calling. The slide from respectable life to homelessness took less than 2 years. The thing about being homeless, he told me once, is that people look through you. You become invisible. But it doesn't happen all at once. First, they see you and look away quickly. Then they see you and cross the street. Finally, they don't see you at all. You're just part of the scenery, like a fire hydrant or a trash can. We became friends. Real friends. He never asked me for money, not once. He didn't know who I was at first. I was just Catherine, a volunteer with too much time and not enough purpose. When he eventually found out about my wealth, nothing changed in how he treated me. He still argued with me about books, still beat me at chess, still called me out when I was being self-pitying. After Thomas died, I thought I'd never laugh again. Marcus made me laugh. He reminded me what it meant to see people, really see them. Not their bank accounts or social standing, but their humanity. I paid for him to get an apartment, but he refused to accept it as charity. He insisted on volunteering at the soup kitchen in exchange, helping others who'd fallen through the same cracks he had. I offered him money countless times. He always refused. I don't need wealth, Catherine, he'd say. I just need stability and a friend. So why am I leaving him everything? Because he'll do what I should have done all along. He'll use it to help people, not in the flashy, tax-deductible, gala-attending way I was raised to understand philanthropy. He'll help people directly, immediately, without judgment. He knows what it's like to need help. He knows how to see the invisible. As for the family, you're all comfortable, more than comfortable. Your mother has her trust fund and properties. Richard has his investment firm. Jennifer married into the Montgomery fortune. None of you need my money. You might want it, but you don't need it. Marcus doesn't need it either, but others do, and he's the only person I trust to get it to them. I love you all, but I loved humanity more. I hope someday you'll understand the difference. Your aunt, Catherine P.S. Marcus doesn't know about this. I never told him. His lawyer will inform him separately. I can only imagine his reaction. He'll probably try to refuse it. Make sure he doesn't. It's the only request I make of you. I found Marcus 2 days later at St. Augustine's soup kitchen. He was serving mashed potatoes, his movements efficient and practiced. He looked older than his 58 years, his face lined with the kind of exhaustion that comes from years of surviving rather than living. Marcus, right? I approached cautiously. He looked up, wariness flickering in his eyes. The automatic defense mechanism of someone who'd learned to expect trouble. Yeah? I'm Catherine Ashford's nephew. Daniel, can we talk? The wariness melted into grief. He set down the serving spoon and stepped aside, nodding to another volunteer to take his place. We walked to a quiet corner of the kitchen. I'm sorry for your loss, he said first, his voice rough. Catherine she was the best person I've ever known. Have you met with her lawyer yet? I have an appointment tomorrow. He rubbed his face. I don't know why. She barely knew me. I almost laughed. She knew you better than she knew us. Over the next hour, I told him everything about the will, about the family's reaction, about Aunt Catherine's letter. He listened in stunned silence, and when I finished, he was shaking his head. No, I can't accept this. That money should go to her family, to charities, to people who need it, I interrupted. That's what she wanted. She trusted you to make sure it gets to the right places. I don't know how to manage billions of dollars. You'll have advisors. The estate includes Mr. Patterson and a full financial team. They'll help with the logistics. But the decisions, who to help, how to help them, that's on you. That's what she wanted. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing. Your family must hate me. Most of them do, I admitted. My uncle's talking about contesting the will, though his lawyers say it's ironclad. My cousin thinks you manipulated a dying woman. My mother. I'm not sure what my mother thinks. And you? I considered the question. I think my aunt was the sanest person in our family. I think she saw something in you that she couldn't find in us. And I think she was probably right. He stopped pacing, looking at me with those tired eyes. I was a teacher, Daniel. I taught 11th grade English. I had a small house and a used car and a wife who made me laugh every day. That was wealth. That was everything. Then it was all gone, and I ended up sleeping under bridges and being invisible. Your aunt saw me. She literally saw me when the rest of the world looked right through me. How am I supposed to live up to that? By seeing others the way she saw you. The months that followed were chaos. Uncle Richard did contest the will, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees only to have the case dismissed. Jennifer gave interviews to society magazines, painting Marcus as a con artist and Aunt Catherine as a troubled woman who'd lost her way. My mother stopped attending family gatherings altogether. But Marcus was transforming lives. His first act was to buy the building that housed St. Augustine's soup kitchen, ensuring it could never be shut down or displaced. Then he started small. He'd meet someone, hear their story, and help directly. A single mother who needed childcare so she could work? Fund it. A veteran struggling with PTSD who needed therapy? Covered. A teenager aging out of foster care who needed housing and education? Done. He didn't make headlines. He refused interviews. When a local news station tried to run a feel-good story about the homeless man turned billionaire philanthropist, he threatened to sue for invasion of privacy. The moment this becomes about me, he told me over coffee one morning, it stops being about them. Catherine understood that. Wealth shouldn't be a performance. He lived modestly. He'd accepted a comfortable but unremarkable apartment and a reliable car, nothing more. The rest went to helping others, administered through a foundation he'd established called Scene, named after what Aunt Catherine had given him. I started volunteering at St. Augustine's, partly to help, partly to understand. That's where I met Teresa. She'd been a nurse, divorced, supporting 2 kids. A car accident left her with injuries that cost her job and her home. She came to the soup kitchen 3 times before Marcus noticed her trying to hide her kids in the corner, embarrassed to be seen. My aunt would have liked you, I overheard him tell her. She always said the people who were most ashamed of needing help were usually the ones who'd spent their lives helping others. 6 months later, Teresa was back on her feet, retrained in medical coding, employed, housed, stable. She brought her kids to thank Marcus. The younger one drew him a picture of a superhero. Marcus hung it in his apartment. This became the pattern. Marcus would see people, really see them. He'd understand their needs beyond just money. Sometimes it was education, sometimes medical care, sometimes just someone to believe in them. The foundation grew, but it never lost that personal touch. Marcus insisted on meeting as many recipients as possible, on understanding their stories. Numbers on a spreadsheet aren't people, he'd say. The moment we start thinking of them as statistics, we've failed. A year after Aunt Catherine's death, my mother finally agreed to meet Marcus. I arranged coffee at a neutral location, and the tension in that cafe could have been cut with a knife. Mrs. Morrison, Marcus said, standing awkwardly. Thank you for coming. My mother studied him with the cool appraisal she usually reserved for investment opportunities. My sister believed in you. I'd like to understand why. They talked for hours. Marcus told her his story, not the sanitized version, but the real one. The slow slide into poverty. The shame, the isolation. The way society's safety net had holes large enough to fall through forever. My mother listened, her expression gradually softening. Finally, she asked, Did you love my sister? Marcus didn't hesitate. Not the way you mean, but yes, I loved her. She gave me back my humanity. Before Catherine, I was invisible. I'd stopped believing I mattered. She saw me, and suddenly I existed again. That's a kind of love, isn't it? My mother's eyes welled up. She was invisible too, you know, to us. We saw her wealth, her eccentricity, her choices we couldn't understand. But we didn't see her. Not really. Not the way you did. She talked about you all, Marcus said gently. She loved you. She just couldn't figure out how to bridge the gap between her world and yours. So she gave you her fortune to build bridges for others? I think so. Yes. My mother reached across the table and took his hand. Then I hope you'll let me help. I have resources, connections. If this is what Catherine wanted, it's the least I can do to honor her memory. That alliance changed everything. With my mother's social connections and Marcus's understanding of need, the Scene Foundation expanded dramatically. Uncle Richard eventually stopped fighting and started ignoring the whole situation, which was a kind of progress. Jennifer moved to Europe with her husband, still bitter. But others in the family began to come around. 3 years after Aunt Catherine's death, I attended the opening of the Catherine Ashford Center for Housing and Dignity, a comprehensive support facility for people experiencing homelessness. It offered everything from showers and job training to mental health services and permanent supportive housing. Marcus gave a speech, uncomfortable in his suit as always. Catherine taught me that wealth isn't money. It's being seen. It's being valued. It's having someone believe in your fundamental worth as a human being. This center exists to tell people what Catherine told me every time we met. You matter. Your story matters. You deserve to be seen. After the ceremony, I found him standing alone, looking at a plaque with Aunt Catherine's photo. Do you ever regret it? I asked. The burden she gave you? He smiled, the same warm smile I'd seen at my cousin's wedding years ago. Every day, and not at all. It's exhausting. The responsibility never stops. Every day, I meet people whose problems are bigger than anything I can fix. I fail constantly, but Catherine knew that would happen. She knew I'd understand that you can't save everyone, but you can see everyone. You can try. She changed your life. She saved my life, he corrected. And now I get to spend the rest of it trying to do the same for others. That's not a burden. That's purpose. 5 years after the will was read, the family gathered for Thanksgiving at my mother's house. Marcus was there, at my mother's insistence. It wasn't entirely comfortable. Jennifer's children still whispered about him, and Uncle Richard mostly ignored him. But it was progress. After dinner, I found Marcus in the library, studying the family photos on the walls. That's Aunt Catherine and Uncle Thomas. I pointed to their wedding photo. 23 years old, completely in love. No idea they'd build a fortune together. She talked about him constantly, Marcus said, about how they'd planned to give it all away eventually, to really make a difference. Then he died, and she lost her direction. Until you. He shook his head. I was just the catalyst. She was already becoming who she needed to be. I just helped her see it. You know what I think? I said. I think she didn't choose you over us. She chose a better version of all of us. She showed us what we could be if we saw people instead of status, if we valued humanity over wealth. Your mother gets it now? She does. And that's Aunt Catherine's legacy too. Not just the foundation, but changing how her family sees the world. Through the doorway, we could hear the family in the living room. My mother was telling stories about Aunt Catherine's childhood. Even Uncle Richard was listening, a slight smile on his face. For the first time in years, we were remembering her together, honoring her as more than just the eccentric aunt who'd given away a fortune. A decade after Aunt Catherine's death, I became director of the Scene Foundation, working alongside Marcus. We'd helped thousands by then, maybe tens of thousands. It was impossible to know the full ripple effect of each life changed. Marcus was 68 now, gray-haired and contemplating something he called semi-retirement, though I suspected he'd never fully stop. "I've been thinking about Catherine's letter to you," he told me one morning. "The one where she said she chose humanity over wealth." "I don't think that's quite right." "No? I think she chose to use wealth for humanity. There's a difference. She didn't reject money. She rejected the isolation it creates, the way it can make you invisible to real problems. She wanted to use it as a tool, not a shield. And you've done that." "We've tried, but I've been thinking about succession planning. I won't be around forever, and this foundation needs to outlive me. It needs to outlive the fortune, actually." That's the real challenge. How do you institutionalize seeing people? How do you prevent it from becoming just another bureaucracy? It was a question we wrestled with constantly. The foundation had grown, necessarily, but Marcus fought to keep it personal. Every grant application was read by a human. Every major decision involved meeting the people involved. It was inefficient and messy and absolutely essential. "Aunt Catherine chose you because you understood that struggle," I said. "You knew that good systems matter, but human connection matters more. You've built both. With help. Your mother, you, dozens of others. That's the other thing Catherine understood. One person can't fix everything. But one person can start something that brings together many people. That's what she did. She started something. On the 15th anniversary of Aunt Catherine's death, we held a memorial service at St. Augustine's. The soup kitchen had become a campus now. Housing, job training, medical care, childcare, all in one place. Hundreds of people came. Many of them people the foundation had helped over the years. Teresa spoke, the former nurse who'd once hidden her kids in shame. She ran a successful medical coding business now and volunteered at the foundation. "Catherine Ashford never knew me," she said, "but she created something that saw me when I was invisible. She trusted someone who understood invisibility to build something that would help the rest of us. That's faith. That's love. That's legacy." My mother spoke too, 80 years old now, but still sharp. "My sister was smarter than all of us. We couldn't see it at the time because we were blinded by convention, by expectations, by our own comfort. She saw a man society had made invisible, and she knew he was the one who could teach us all how to see. She was right. Marcus didn't take from our family. He gave us back our humanity." When Marcus stood to speak, his voice was thick with emotion. "Catherine told me once that wealth should make you more human, not less. She said the tragedy of extreme wealth is that it often does the opposite. It isolates you, insulates you, makes you forget what it's like to be afraid, or vulnerable, or desperate. She fought against that isolation every day, and when she knew she was dying, she made sure that fight would continue." He pulled out a letter, creased and worn from reading. "She left me a letter, too. I've never shared it publicly, but I'd like to read part of it now." He cleared his throat. "Marcus, I'm giving you an impossible task. You'll want to refuse it. I know you. You'll feel unworthy, overwhelmed, terrified." "Good. That means you're taking it seriously. Remember this. I'm not giving you this fortune because you're perfect or wise or have all the answers. I'm giving it to you because you remember what it's like to be invisible, and you'll never let yourself forget. Stay human, Marcus. Keep seeing people. Keep being overwhelmed by need and scared by the responsibility. The day you start feeling comfortable with billions of dollars is the day you'll have failed. I trust you with my life's work because I trust you to never trust yourself completely. That's wisdom. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. 20 years after that reading of the will, I sat with Marcus in his modest apartment. He was 78 now, slowing down but still engaged. The foundation was thriving, having helped more than 100,000 people directly and millions more through systemic advocacy work. Do you ever wonder what Uncle Richard or Jennifer would have done with the money? I asked. Marcus chuckled. I used to. I don't anymore. They would have done what most wealthy people do. Maintained their comfort, given some to charity, passed the rest to their kids. Nothing wrong with that, necessarily. But it wouldn't have been this. This was the network of 15 centers across the country. This was the advocacy work that had changed housing policy in 6 states. This was the thousands of people who'd been seen when they'd been invisible. Catherine made you uncomfortable, I said. On purpose. Best gift anyone ever gave me. After years of being uncomfortable because I was homeless, it was strange to be uncomfortable because I had resources to help. But that discomfort kept me honest, kept me remembering that every decision affected real people. The family gets it now. Even Richard's kids work with the foundation. Your aunt played a long game. She knew the money itself wasn't the point. It was what the money could teach us about being human. About seeing each other, about responsibility to something larger than ourselves. He pulled out a chess set, the same one he used to play with Aunt Catherine at the soup kitchen. One more game? For old time's sake? As we played, I thought about legacy, about how Aunt Catherine had been remembered initially as the eccentric billionaire who'd snubbed her family. About how that story had transformed over 2 decades into something more complex and beautiful. The story of a woman who'd valued humanity over convention, who'd trusted a homeless man to carry forward her life's work, who'd changed not just individual lives, but the way an entire family understood wealth and purpose. She was right, wasn't she? I said, moving my knight. About everything. Marcus studied the board, contemplating his next move. She was right that I'd try to refuse the money. She was right that I'd be terrified. She was right that the discomfort would keep me honest. He moved his bishop, putting my king in check. But she was wrong about one thing. What's that? She said she chose me over the family. But she didn't. She chose the best possible future for everyone. Me, you, your mother, everyone the foundation has helped. Everyone who's learned to see people differently because of this work. She didn't choose a person over people. She chose a path. And she knew exactly the right person to walk it. Checkmate. 25 years after Aunt Catherine's death, Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep. The modest apartment he'd insisted on keeping was found to contain little of material value, but his walls were covered with photos and letters from people the foundation had helped. At his memorial service, held at the main Scene Foundation campus, thousands came. Formerly homeless individuals who now ran businesses. Single mothers who'd become nurses, teachers, entrepreneurs, veterans who'd found healing, families who'd been given second chances. My mother, 85 now and frail but determined, stood to speak. My sister Catherine saw what I couldn't. She saw that Marcus Wright was exactly who our family needed. Not because he would maintain our wealth or uphold our social status, but because he would transform wealth into what it should always be, a tool for human dignity. He spent 25 years proving her right, and in doing so, he taught all of us, not just our family, but everyone he touched, that being seen is the foundation of being human. The foundation continued, now led by a board that included formerly homeless individuals, family members, and professionals who devoted their lives to the work. The endowment was structured to last in perpetuity, carefully managed, but never losing sight of its core mission: to see people, really see them, especially when the rest of the world looked away. I became chairman after Marcus's death, a role I'd never imagined when I'd sat in that lawyer's office decades ago, angry and confused about my aunt's choice. Now, with the perspective of years and the wisdom of hindsight, I understood. Aunt Catherine hadn't chosen a homeless man over her family. She'd chosen to show her family and the world what it meant to see people as people. She'd chosen to trust someone who understood invisibility to teach the rest of us how to look. She'd chosen purpose over comfort, humanity over status, legacy over inheritance. She'd chosen perfectly. On what would have been Aunt Catherine's 100th birthday, I returned to St. Augustine's, the original soup kitchen where she and Marcus had met. It was still operating, still serving meals, still seeing people. I volunteered for a shift, serving mashed potatoes just as Marcus had done so many years ago. Each person who came through the line had a story. I could see it in their eyes, in the way they held themselves, in their expressions of gratitude or shame, or simple exhaustion. An older woman paused at my station. "You're Daniel Ashford, aren't you? Catherine's nephew?" "I am." I knew her, before all this. She gestured vaguely at the campus around us. I was teaching with Marcus, actually, before his life fell apart. I came here about 10 years ago when my own life imploded. The foundation helped me get back on my feet. I teach again now at a community college. Your aunt's money gave me that. But Marcus's humanity, that's what saved me. He remembered me. After years of being forgotten, someone remembered I'd been a person before I became a problem. She moved on, and I stood there with a serving spoon in my hand, finally understanding the full scope of what Aunt Catherine had done. She hadn't just given away her fortune. She'd given away the isolation that fortune created. She'd demolished the walls between us and them, between the worthy and the worthless, between visibility and invisibility. And she'd trusted Marcus, a man the world had rendered invisible, to show everyone else how to see. It was the sanest, most loving thing anyone in our family had ever done. As I served the next person in line, I thought about the letter Aunt Catherine had left me, still kept in my desk drawer, read and reread countless times over the decades. The final line echoed in my mind. I didn't choose a homeless man over our family. I chose to show our family how to be human again. I chose Marcus because he never forgot how. I hope you'll learn from him, as I did. I had learned. We all had. And Aunt Catherine's legacy, that enormous fortune transformed into human dignity, continued to teach anyone willing to see. Epilogue. 50 years after Aunt Catherine's death, I was 92 years old and finishing my final term as chairman of the Scene Foundation. My daughter was taking over, representing a third generation committed to the work. The foundation had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. 40 centers across the country, international programs, systemic change in housing policy, healthcare access, and economic opportunity. Millions of lives touched, transformed, or saved. But it had never lost what Marcus had insisted on preserving: the personal touch. Every grant still required meeting the person. Every major decision still involved understanding stories, not just statistics. It was inefficient and messy, and absolutely essential. In the foundation's lobby hung 3 portraits: Aunt Catherine, Uncle Thomas, and Marcus. Beneath them, a plaque bore the foundation's mission statement, written by Marcus in those early days. Everyone deserves to be seen, not for what they lack, but for who they are. Not through judgment, but through recognition of shared humanity. Wealth is not money. Wealth is dignity. Our mission is to ensure that no one is invisible. Below that, in smaller letters, was the line that captured everything. Catherine Ashford saw Marcus right. He spent his life helping others see each other. This is her legacy. This is his work. This is our calling. I stood before those portraits, remembering that day in the lawyer's office when we'd all been so certain Aunt Catherine had lost her mind. We'd been wrong. She'd been the only one thinking clearly. She hadn't chosen a homeless man over her family. She'd chosen to expand the definition of family to include everyone. She'd chosen to use wealth not as a shield, but as a bridge. She'd chosen to see what no one else could. That the man society had rendered invisible was exactly who could teach the rest of us how to look. It was the sanest, most brilliant, most loving choice anyone could have made. And 50 years later, the ripples of that choice continued to spread, touching lives in ways we couldn't measure, creating connections we couldn't count, building a world where being seen was a right, not a privilege. Aunt Catherine had been a billionaire, but her true fortune wasn't money. It was vision, the ability to see past wealth and status and convention to recognize fundamental human worth. She'd given that vision to Marcus. He'd shared it with us. And now it belonged to anyone willing to open their eyes and really see the people around them. That was the inheritance that mattered. That was the legacy that would outlive us all. My aunt had been right about everything, and the homeless man she'd trusted with her fortune had proven worthy of every impossible expectation. The story had seemed insane at first. Now, looking back across 50 years of transformed lives and a permanently changed family, I understood the truth. It was the sanest story ever told. The end.